I think we should start. There's a lot of things happening in this process, as we all know. We're all eagerly awaiting a major text that's now due at 1 o'clock, I hear. So, yeah, but there may still be time for lunch, though. What I'd like to do, our minister hopefully will join us shortly, but rather than just wait around, I'd like to start and get this side event, which probably one of the last at this COP28. I must say it's the third time we've had a side event on this day, and they've always proved quite challenging, as people in Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh will recall. Yeah, but it's great to have you all here, and I want to thank the Norwegian government for facilitating this event, and thank our Norwegian representative who's sitting there at the back. So just to get started, basically what we want to do is to talk about the Equinox process, and the Equinox process was kicked off by the summit that we had in Brussels last March. The objective is to accelerate the transfer of climate knowledge to policy for urgent action. And as we all know, science is fundamental to our understanding of climate change and informing effective actions to address its causes and consequences. The IPCC has a unique role in all of this. And European science and scientific leadership has been central to the working of the IPCC since it's established. Obviously, our friends from Sweden, can mention it here in Norway, were core to, in the Norway Pavilion, are core to establishing the IPCC through Bert Bolin. And we've just finished the sixth assessment cycle, in which the 3 working groups were chaired by leading scientists from Europe. Timely access to current and authoritative scientific information is essential, and it's essential for everybody, from policymakers to citizens, and the urgency to accelerate the generation of transfer of knowledge from science to policy couldn't be clearer, and that's what we want to tackle at a European scale. So our good friend Jim Ski, who's been here for the last 2 weeks, I think, also recognises this, and he at our summit in Brussels last March, he basically said this is a significant and timely initiative for Europe, and it has the potential to contribute to the future work of the IPCC. He has since become chair of the IPCC, so yeah, I think he's keen to see this continue from his side. We had a lot of people in Brussels. Our friend from the Commission even was speaking there. And I think that's you, Pierre, is it? Yeah, you were in Brussels as well, which is obviously, you're a native of Belgium, and Petra. So what we got out of that summit was a summit statement, and that statement actually asked JPI Climate to look at this issue about how to do this at a European level, and basically to focus on the issues of climate neutrality, climate resilience, and managing social, economic, secure and just transition and transformations. Obviously, European language can be quite different. And we're requested to do this in cooperation with the European Union. The other thing that was requested is that we look at how to bring on young scientists, because obviously we need the next generation of scientists there. So we've been looking at that process since then. Under the Spanish presidency, we've had a major event in Madrid, and thanks to Maria, who facilitated that. This was under the Spanish presidency, the Think 2030 dialogue, which happened in October, and there's a really good report coming from that, and yeah, it's very useful. So that's where we are at. We are on the trajectory to come back to Brussels in the 26th of March next year, EU presidency, and we will have a report, and we will look at a number of products, and that's one of the things we want to explore here a bit further, the types of products that we can produce, the themes we should explore, and then how to do it. So with that introduction, what I'd like to do is to invite María Sanz to give a short presentation on behalf of her minister. So thank you, María.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting Spain to be in this event today. As some of you that were in Brussels in March know, our Minister of Ecological Transition and... Okay. So we continue with it.
Yeah. My Minister, my colleague Maria was just about to speak on behalf of her Minister Teresa, but since you're here, I think I'll let you sit down for a moment. And I would like to say, I've just mentioned this is the third time that we've had this type of side event, and this is the first time we've actually succeeded in having you here, Minister. So, that's great. I'll give you a moment to have a look at what you might be saying, and when you're ready, would you like to? I'm delighted to welcome you here, and I'd like to ask you to make an opening statement. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Frank. There's a slight knowing laugh among the Irish contingent here, because I know we were meant to do this together last year, and the last minute negotiations got in the way, and I thought that was going to be the case today, but I'm very glad it isn't. And just to share a few thoughts in terms of how we use our research capability, our scientific expertise and knowledge and understanding. 2 or 3 thoughts in terms of what and this connects to the negotiations actually. One of the things that we're clearly today is we need to build up capacity, particularly in a lot of developing and other countries, to make the transformation we need to make in adaptation, in mitigation, and I think our universities, particularly and our research institutions, could and should have a central role in that collaborative work in terms of building up capability in other developing countries particularly. And I know that's not around the agenda of this Equinox project, but I think it's an important thing, first step, to say we should be looking to share, we should be looking to knowledge transfer, we should looking for in the developing countries. I think that should be our first kind of direction. Second thing, this is tricky. It's not. The science around climate change is obviously undisputed at this stage. We can see it. Ireland was struck. There was a tornado in Leitrim yesterday, a county in Ireland, northwest of Ireland. We're not used to tornadoes. It's just symbolic of every day, every week, something's happening. So the science of what's happening is bewildering and worrying, actually, the scale of the jump up this year. But the other aspect of the science that, as a policymaker here now, we have a climate action plan. I'm a Minister of the Environment, where we have to make this leap. We have to have our emissions next 7 years and go net zero in 2 decades. One of the things, the hard things to admit, is there's still some areas of uncertainty. I give you the example of land use. Land use emissions in our country are highly complex. And we're only discovering this in a sense where we get down to the hard yards of planning to reduce them. An example being our understanding of the emissions from forestry sector dramatically changed in the last year. What we thought had been a sink, we knew it was turning into a source, but it was a much bigger source than we expected. And even the science around that in the negotiations we were involved in as Minister, relying on the policymakers, was kind of quite startling, because you might get 2 or 3 different views. So where you land on is a tricky one. Now, for scientists, this is very interesting, because I think science thrives in uncertainty. In a sense, the whole job is to delve into those areas where we're less than certain. Scientists, I remember on the whole issue of communicating science, of this science of climate change, I remember a scientist being asked once, well, why can't you be more emphatic, or more absolutely black and white? And the difficulty for a scientist, that's not how the empirical method works. And actually, when you delve into the empirical method, you realise there's always a further level of understanding you seek. So what we're going to have to do, I think, at home now, speaking of that and thinking about that, particularly when it comes to the mitigation side or adaptation as well, the land use particularly, we're going to have to work in an iterative way with the relevant stakeholders, with farming, with forestry, with nature protection, and really delve into the scientific understanding there, knowing that we're in an uncertain place. It isn't categoric. The role of methane is absolutely certain, the role of all the greenhouse gases, but the actual interplay between land use and what we need to do in reductions is one of the areas, as an example, where I'm really interested in using our scientific capability to, and I'm sure it's absolutely the same in other neighbouring European countries. So as well as I'm saying sharing our knowledge with developing countries, we need to share with each other the Horizon and other projects. I was speaking last night at a business event, and I think this is true. I was speaking about what I always kind of depict. There are three revolutions taking place at the moment. There's a digital revolution, there's a clean energy revolution, and there's a transport revolution in real world happening. Digital revolution driven by Moore's law and the increased processing power. Artificial intelligence now is the latest leap and iteration. It relies on the clean energy revolution because all those data centres to power it have to be powered zero carbon. So the two are connected. And the clean energy revolution also requires digital because it too, it's a balancing revolution between variable supply and variable demand. And the management of that requires network communication systems more than anything else. The wind turbines are relatively straightforward. It's the balancing capability, the storage flexibility capability is really strong. So the two revolutions, digital and clean energy, are connected in that way. And thirdly, in transport's the same. The transport revolution will also go all electric, so it'll be completely intertwined with the clean energy revolution. It'll be one of the balancing places. But also we have to move away from just everyone owning a car towards transport as a service, automated transport systems. So that too requires digital systems to connect it. My scientific background from the age of 16, where I did the equivalent of the intercert, I did no level in ecology, was all about the understanding interconnection of all our systems. And I mentioned those three revolutions because there's another third area, just the principle or thought I might share with you, is what do we need to get that revolution right? Well, it has to be, it can't be in siloed disciplines, it has to understanding the interconnection. But also I would argue that one of the most fundamental things we need to get right, I was at a brilliant event in Kyoto a number of years ago. It was Science and Technology in Our Society. It was Nobel Prize Central. Professors from Harvard, Oxford, Tokyo University, they were really the top of the scientific establishment. And it was fascinating for me that what they were actually talking about was ethics and values, recognizing that to manage these revolutions, particularly the digital one, which is so fast-changing and so complex, a scientific perspective alone will not bring the kind of the benefits to humanity that we can get from these technologies. So it's philosophy almost, or ethics, and a kind of broader sense, which science is not comfortable with. It's not easily being empirical and testing and when you're into this realm, but it's what's needed. One of my heroes was a man called John Moriarty. He was an Irish mystic, philosopher, green, died about 10 years ago. Brilliant perspective in my mind of we need to reharrow the myths we're living in, particularly European myths, in terms of how we connect to the natural world. If we're going to avoid by what he described as we'll be the iceberg upon which the Titanic crashes. So how do we do that? He was quite disparaging of the scientific community, I think maybe too much so. He felt that they were disrespecting or not adhering to this other dimension that we need to stitch together to it. And that's not easy to do. That's a real challenge. Hard to write a paper to get a PhD to get that, or even more so in research institution. But I just share that as one thought as to what we need to do in Europe. And I think we're absolutely well able and well placed in Europe to be good at this. So that's my scientific understanding of the importance of interconnection between North and South in sharing best capability, between these different revolutions and understanding the complexity, as I said, of our natural system still, where we have a lot of work to do, but ultimately coming to address some of the solutions, or science to help us give us the tools to address the solutions, will require that bringing together in some ways of humanities and scientific knowledge to deliver the best outcome. That's my guiding. It's not a North Star in this case. North Star is 1.5 degrees, but it might be Orion, or Orion. And thank you, Frank, for your work and everyone here. But Frank particularly is one of the questions asked to everyone here, how many COPs? Frank goes back 20 years or so, isn't it? And but all our work as policymakers is based on the bedrock understanding that you trust the people who are advising you and who have a knowledge and understanding. And Frank is perfect epitome of that. Thank you. I will have to skedaddle shortly to a negotiating meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Much appreciated. I'd like to invite Maria back, who's making a statement on behalf of the Spanish Minister, who cannot be with us for obvious reasons. So.
Well, I said good morning already. So, as you know, in March, Minister Ribera was not able to be with us, but she also delivered a video statement, and she wanted not to miss the possibility to also deliver a short statement here, because she really believes on the process that you're launching. So on her words, we all recognize that science is fundamental to understand the challenges of climate change poses to us and the interlinkages with other global challenges. It is therefore of critical importance to build on and continue to advance science contributions to the current understandings of Earth climate, including human influence on climate and the impacts of climate change in society and ecosystems. The work of IPCC in this global role of assessing scientific understanding of climate change and responses to the challenges that it poses was of paramount importance in assessing, now it's gone, in assessing and presenting the knowledge of climate change from the causes to the solutions, as well as impacts in our society and ecosystems, and informing our policy decisions with the best available science timely. European science and the significant contributions and leaderships of European scientists and institutions to this work has been recognized. We need to maintain and strengthen the European excellency and leadership in climate science, including more inputs from social science. More than ever, timely access to scientific information is essential for informing responses by actors in the public, private, institutions, and citizens. It is therefore urgent to continue and improve the generation of dynamically transfer of knowledge into policies and actions. And with this, I close the statement. She will love to be here to have a very lively conversation with the Minister of Ireland, so she apologized for not being able to be in person.
Thank you, thank you, Maria and Minister Ryan. Just to say, in March there last year, we had the Equinox Summit, which is hosted by the Belgian government, and thanks to the Belgian government for doing that. The Belgian government will host the next Equinox Summit in March of 2024 during their presidency. At the summit, 12 countries signed up to support the process, and the process is to accelerate the transfer of knowledge from science to policy, focusing on climate neutrality, climate resilience, and managing that transition and transformation in a just and equitable manner. So what I'd like to do is to invite some of our experts here to come up to have a panel discussion about the products and the themes, the products, and the process. So thank you very much, Minister, and good luck with the negotiations. Thank you. So our first person to join us is Antonio Navarra, who has taken over. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself, Antonio.
Okay, I'm Antonio Navarra. I'm a climatologist. I'm the director of the Centro Euro-Mediterraneo sui Cambiamenti Climatici, the Italian foundation that is tasked with studying climate change from numerical models to socioeconomic something. But I'm also the chair of the JPI Climate that I've actually followed in very difficult shoes to fill, like Frank. So I'll try to do my best.
Okay, I'll come and sit in a moment. Okay, so Elena Lopez-Gunn, I'm soon to join BC3, the Basque Center for Climate Change, and I'm also a member of the European Scientific Advisory Board on Climate Change.
And
hello, I'm Myles Allen, University of Oxford, and a long-standing supporter of the whole JPI Climate Initiative, and I'm delighted that science is still united in Europe, so we are very much part of this. Brits can nod sagely at this point.
And just to say, JPI Climate is not an EU. We've held events under the EU flag, I suppose, in Brussels and in Madrid, and will do again. But JPI Climate is the European research area, and what we want to do is to realise the potential of the European research area. We have, I think, a vast resource of knowledge within Europe, but we're not optimising how we're using that knowledge. And what I'd like to do, I suppose, the Equinox Summit is actually about making that better, creating that space so we can utilise that knowledge. So I suppose, going back to the themes, and I'll go to you first, Myles, if you don't mind. Climate neutrality. Can you talk to us about, first of all, we had the first climate neutrality forum in Oxford, Berlin and Milano. Mm-hmm. It was done virtually.
And Brussels.
And Brussels, of course. And what should we do next? How should we do it next?
Sure. Well, I think the process here, just to bring it all home to you, has illustrated the importance of this kind of regular forum to keep science up to date for the policy community, and the process that JPI Climate is convening to provide a conduit for regular updates of science here. We've got Pierre Friedlingstein, give everybody a wave, Pierre, at the back there, who's already involved, of course, in the Global Carbon Project, and make sure that we are all up to date in the COP process, in the current level of emissions and so on. So that process is relatively well-oiled, if I may use that analogy, Pierre. But there are other aspects of the science of climate that need continuous updating, although the IPCC does a great job. It does it every 7 years, and inevitably because of the publication rules around IPCC, even when the IPCC report comes out, the publication deadline is generally a year or two earlier, so it's generally talking about science which is already a couple of years, or a year or so out of date. So, one thing which Richard Betts, also joining us, has highlighted in this week is that we're not as good as Pierre is at updating emissions when it comes to updating the current level of warming. So we suddenly noticed in the text it was suggesting the current level of warming was 1.1 degree, and of course that's the number in the IPCC report, but it refers to the decade of the 2010s. I mean, and with the world warming at 0.2 degrees per decade, we're already at 1.25 degrees. And so that kind of thing, just keeping everything up to date, up to the minute in a rapidly changing climate is the sort of thing we need this sort of the Equinox initiative for. I've mentioned a couple of global indicators, but of course where it gets really interesting is when it comes to regional indicators, understanding what's happening to climate change in individual locations, in individual countries, relating to the adaptation summits, which JPI Climate has also played a big role in, and which I know you'll be speaking to in a minute. And so as I see it, this is kind of as it were, the Working Group 1 complement to the Adaptation Summit process so as to keep those Working Group 1 indicators of the pace of change and so on out of date. I am conscious of the fact that I am an academic and I didn't look at my watch when I started talking, I've probably run over time.
I'm just going to say that it's also Working Group 2. We do want to work with the Global Carbon Project, and obviously the Global Carbon Project was presented here. You updated the global emissions of CO2. Methane we're still waiting for, are we? Yes?
Yeah, it's not as well oiled.
Yeah, and we would like, methane is a really important greenhouse gas, so it'd be really great if we could, through JPI Climate, I suppose.
Yeah, we got you here just to put the pressure on, Pierre. Sorry about that, didn't tell you.
To oil that process so that we can get, because obviously the methane pledge, which was made in Glasgow, is a really important pledge. And we heard at the opening statement here about a concept of net zero methane, but we won't go there to explore what that might mean. But certainly from oil and gas production. And obviously the other big one is N2O, which obviously for as the Minister says, for Ireland the land issue is very important, and fertiliser use is one of the key sources, and sometimes almost abusive fertiliser use, certainly in Ireland, is important. So I see the neutrality as crossing that, and also the pathways element. Myles, how do we get?
Yes, and understanding, so at a regional level, understanding the implications of individual decisions, both individual country decisions and individual company decisions for the transition to climate neutrality. So lots of companies are making pledges. They're discovering those pledges. I've heard a lot of discussion of pledges this week, lots of very positive talk, and I think a lot of companies are also discovering that it's not that easy to implement some of the pledges they're doing, and they're coming up with ever more clever consultants are coming up with ever more clever ways of allowing you to achieve your net zero goals. And I think we need a process like this one as a, to set the rules of the game, to help people understand what is actually delivering the goals of the Paris Agreement. And it's got to be outside the reason I think JPI works as a convener of this is it's got to be above the fight of corporate interests, and so something that works at a transnational level that provides that overall framing is what's needed.
Yeah, and indeed Article 6 issues, which are the market issues, are fraught here. I'll hand over to Elena to...
Oh yeah, we'll be all over them.
Okay, just a little bit. Just on one of the key issues, I suppose, one of the products that we hope to have ready for the Equinox is the European sea level rise analysis, which has been led by somebody you know very well, Antonio, and Bart van Hunik, who is now the co-chair of the Working Group 2. He was elected there in July. So I spoke to him there. He's very keen on what we're doing here in JPI Climate about this sort of the ocean basins of Europe and how they're manifesting sea level rise. But you're part of the European Climate Change Advisory Body. Can you talk to us about how useful that sort of getting a flow of science might be for your particular activities, or whatever you'd like to say? I suppose.
No, I mean, I think we think it's absolutely fundamental that it's a whole science community, and now we need all the knowledge on the table and all hands on deck. So for us, in a way, we build, it's slightly different to the IPCC in that we're actually, like the UK Climate Change Committee, we are actually supposed to give opinion as compared to the IPCC that just has this red line. So in that sense, it's fundamental that the quality of science in the EU is exceptional, and I think we should protect it as a really important, and also the young scientists coming up as well, all that talent. I think it's also important from building on what you said about sea level rise. Well, the first thing is, of course, this year will be important from the adaptation point of view, because we will have the first EU climate risk assessment. So it will be, I think, an opportunity also for us to how do we make that process go further and deeper, because we now know that, of course, globally, the whole world is really, we're seeing the impacts now, your minister mentioning the tornado. I mean, in Spain, María José knows and in Italy, the drought at the moment is really quite concerning. With sea level rise, just to say for the EU Climate Change Advisory Board on the work program, which will be finalized in December, we will be looking, from the adaptation point of view, we will be looking at agriculture. That's where we're starting, and also from an integrated perspective. On sea level rise, though, I think because of capacity, not yet. So in a way, I think it's great because then we can kind of build on the work being done by the Equinox. I was in a side event in the Spanish pavilion with 3 regions, organized, facilitated by, organized by BC3, and basically they've just had the risk and vulnerability analysis thanks to some funding from the national government, and they're really worried. The message coming through is they are very aware of the assets at risk, and we're talking the main economic sectors in the 3 regions, and they are really aware. So they are definitely on board. Also, we know that the impacts, Europe, we actually like 1 degree more than the rest of the world. So, the Mediterranean, we're right next to the Mediterranean. You can imagine from extreme events, it's going to be really, really like tough times coming ahead. I think also I also would ask, the mission adaptation could be an opportunity. We have, sometimes I feel it's like herding cats with big projects, but I think we have to also learn to collaborate. I think, we hear this now, that the challenge is so enormous that we really have to work in a different way. And I like, from the comment before, the systems thinking, network thinking. I think the youth think that way. I think we have to also learn from them. Although sometimes I think they also have to learn from us. We have experience, they have innovation, so partnering would be good. But I do think, for me, what I think science is, and I think it's even more important now, and I really agree with what Myles said, truth to power. We need to be, and I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of in the European Scientific Advisory Board. The one thing that we're really protecting, really like gold dust, is our independence. We have to be able to say what we think is based on evidence and science. And that, I think, is our message, is that together, all of us, we should really protect that. Because we will be needed. Because there will be, the incumbents, are going to be challenged, and we are changing everything, and there will be reactions in the system against it. So we have to, keep course.
Yeah. And thank you for mentioning the European risk assessment. We have the leader of that project sitting just here. Julia, would you like to say something about that work?
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. Indeed, it's a major effort that we are putting together with involving more than 70 scientists with different roles and capacity. It will be a very, let's say, first attempt. Of course, it will not be the last one, but it's. We are really producing the very first assessment for Europe, and we really hope this will be helpful for the European policy. So, yes. So, let's see. It will be soon available, and I cannot say more, but
I've got the draft on my.
Okay.
Thankfully, I have Christmas
Frank.
to read it.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay, thank you, Julia. And Antonio, obviously your vast experience in all of these areas, I think.
Well, I'm not so sure about vast experience, also because I wanted to say something, but then when I listened to the minister statement, I sort of decided to change. Because he addressed the issue of the more general role that science and policy have, that is, in the end, is the background problem that we have here. We all are using a sort of frame of mind in which we think that if we come up with enough evidence, then policy will follow, because once we put compelling evidence down there. But the problem is that politics is the most complex human activity, right? What are the drivers of politics? It requires an interpretive framework of the world. And then if you think about what thing happened, when the steam engine was the dominant metaphor, then everything was a machine. So everything was interpreted as a machine. Then in the past 20, 30 years, because economic relations were the defining relation, then everything was defined by economic relations. And we thought that economic methods were powerful enough to actually shape behaviors. Now, I have to say that in the last couple of years, things have changed a bit, because what we have seen is that ideology and emotions and feelings and mood and respect or absence of respect, all these things have become issues of the political process, how you decide things. So we're entering a different world from the last 20 years, and I think science has a role to play in this complex system, in helping shaping a new intellectual framework in which we interpret the world. But we have to be aware that it's not going to be just facts. So I think we will have a role into establishing a factual basis, and I think that's important. I think we should also have a role in some sorts contribute to the ethical and moral discussions that are taking place. So we cannot neglect that role. We cannot think we are sort of, how can I say, completely unbiased players in these things, because we are not. That's the truth. So I think we have to be aware of that. One of the issues is that is the community ready, the scientific community ready to do that? Well, up to a certain point, I think as a community we are geared, very competitive, very strongly individualistic. We're trying to make things nobody has ever done. And so routine work that is, for instance, necessary to establish updated information is coming difficult. Now imagine that somebody would have proposed a PhD students in the 50s, a thesis that would say, well, you have to go up a mountain in Hawaii every day and measure CO2 for the next 20 years. I don't see many takers of that PhD, right? So I think we have to think if we have the right institutions in the scientific environment that are useful now to fulfill this role, because I don't think that we can take the scientific community in general and tell them all sorts of roles, from doing state-of-the-art, forward-leaning science, and then also updating routinely every year, because the results will be IPCC that is doing a good job, but every 7 years. So my point, and I finish, is that I think we should also think about the institution network. Do we have the right institutions in order to fulfill these different roles right now?
Well, thank you, Antonio, for picking up in the ministry, sort of delved into, keep it. He delved into getting into the sort of myths and narratives that exist through our cultural experience of life, and that's very important. The other thing you mentioned was AI, and again, I think that's at the other end of the spectrum, so to speak. Yeah. But again, does it give us an opportunity to do something different?
Well, thank you very much. AI, I think, is a very good case. It's a very good case in which the world was much faster than the scientific community, especially ours. We've been surprised. And it's a very peculiar situation in which most of the advance is not done in the academic community. The really innovative stuff is done in the private tech sector. That's where the bright talent is. And of course, everybody will say that's because they pay them too much. That's probably true. But nevertheless, that's a fact. Not only that, but it's also changing the game, because the rate of innovations and the speed with which things are changing is one order of magnitude faster than the way in which we are used to. Climate modeling, weather modeling was changing slowly, but in a very deliberate way. We are used to that. These guys are breaking the toys, and they're used to that. They love breaking things. So it's a different world, and I think that it will be important for us, in the climate community, to recognize that there is opportunity there. The AI is actually AI is basically nonlinear iterative statistical technique. I mean, let's call them the way they are, okay? They don't learn anything, they're numbers, but they're very powerful methods. So I think there is an opportunity also to link the natural climate variables with socioeconomic variables in a way that the traditional, differential equation models could not really do. So that's something that's definitely something that we need to look at very, very carefully.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Just to say, if anybody wants to add anything, just put up your Maria, since you're she's a minister.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think what Antonio was saying is important, but I think it's not only about institutions change. It's also about incentives for scientists. I mean, the way the scientific career is shaped today doesn't have incentives to do what we need to do now. And in my institute, we have been working very much hand-to-hand with the Ministry of Ecological Transition on helping them how to shape the ecological transition in a way that will avoid distributional impacts on low-income households, which we presented in October. This has been extremely useful. But the reaction of my scientists after 2 years of that is, but I don't have time to publish, right? Because these guys are just bombarding me with more and more requests. And I said, but they do that because you're useful. So it is even better to be useful now than publish a paper. But of course, the incentive in the career is to have a CV based on publications in scientific. So I think we need to change that as well. And we need to provide incentives, because they don't need necessarily only economic incentives. I think that's important to keep in mind. And by the way, I have hard time to find IA modelers because of the salary, but I have to recognize that there's some people that even from the world that you describe, they are coming to our world with a different mindset. So I think it's important to bridge these two worlds, taking advantage of the people that is just not very happy with the way private sector is dealing with AI.
Sorry, the lady behind you. Could you introduce, I don't know your name.
Yeah, I'm Gudminder Kaur from the Norwegian delegation. I think it was an interesting analysis by you about that the last 20 years have been more focused on like the economic rationale that, if you adapt to climate change now, you will save money, for example, and now you're saying that now there is more, that feelings are getting more importance, and that respect versus not respect, and but that's quite like, especially feelings is quite opposite of research, you can say, because you have you are showing to facts. And how do you think that research will continue to be relevant within that new rational that we are in now? No.
Okay, thank you very much. I see there's another hand there, Richard.
Thank you. Hi, Richard Betts from the Met Office and University of Exeter in the UK. So, thanks, Myles, for the introduction earlier as well. So, following up from Minister's point earlier, which picked up on Antonio's point about institutions, I think, yes, we should reflect on do we have the right institutions, but we don't have time to generate new institutions and update them. We need to make the best use of current institutions now. Myles mentioned the IPCC and the kind of the excellent but work, but the long time periods between the reports and so on. How can we make better use of institutions like IPCC? I mean, the example that you showed earlier that we've flagged now, the current text for the global stocktake has the wrong number for the current level of global warming. So incidentally, if anyone in the room can help influence the text and get that updated, that would be very much appreciated. But the point here is, how can we avoid this happening in the future by, can the IPCC have an annual update or something, I don't know, which is officially endorsed and therefore accepted by the parties here? Because the point is, the parties need to decide what their authoritative source of information is, isn't it, which is currently IPCC. So we need to streamline it. How can we do that?
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, because obviously the IPCC is so fundamental to this process. We can't really do anything that would undermine it, but I think what we have to do is be able to, I suppose, help and assist and I think that's the challenge, and that sort of goes to the question I'd like to ask these people before we finish. What should we report back in March to the Equinox Summit about? What should we say we've done, and what solutions have we for that question and the other questions? I'll give it to Myles. I'll put him on the spot. Yeah. Give you time I put a bit of pressure on you, Antonio.
So what about me? Anyway, okay, well, that's fine.
You're used to it. So.
Yeah, okay. So actually, just responding to Antonio, I'm often reminded by colleagues that I work in a more than 800-year-old humanities institution where scientists are relatively new interlopers. And I think actually it's something that universities can really help with, because we actually do bridge these in a way that research institutes often don't. I mean, maybe universities need to do a better job of actually interacting between different departments and so on. But I think institutions like research funding agencies and so on can help that by actually actively encouraging universities to work on interdisciplinary areas and so on. So I think but universities are recognizing this and want to do it, but it is hard. And I think this, to Richard's point, I think. I think and calling out Pierre again, I mean, the Global Carbon Project shows us what can be done. I mean, it's not, once you've established a process and the process is trusted, then people trust the process and the number can then be updated. I'm sorry, I'm sort of repeating myself a bit here, but the point is that we don't have to rely on a 10-year-old number just because that was the number. If at the same time we establish that number, we also establish a process and review the process for updating it, then that's what. But of course, somebody still has to do the update, and that update needs to be resourced. And I'm sure Pierre wouldn't mind me pointing out that it's actually quite a struggle to get that continuous update resourced, because it's not the kind of thing that academics do from day to day. I'm not being paid by Pierre to say this, but I'm sure he'll agree. Anyway, that'd be my reaction.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Myles. And Pierre, you want to say something just before?
Well, I've already said it, Pierre. What do you want? Are you about to give us a bill?
Before the summer from Peace Forster and many of us, which is called the... Forgot the title.
Indicators.
Indicators of global climate change. So what we did is the same as GCP for the carbon budget, but for many more indicators. Yeah. All greenhouse gases, relative forcing, global temperature, extremes. So it's just an activity which we did it this year for the first time. The ambition is to update this every year. So it doesn't replace IPCC, just keep track of the numbers every year as opposed to every 7 years. But of course we are facing the same issue, which is the funding is lacking. So at the moment we do it like on a shoestring when we've got spare time in the evening, but it's not optimal.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And there's a website, climatechangetracker.org, where you can see this year's numbers, and we're trying to. And the crucial point there is we're using IPCC methods and just bringing in new data. So we're not. We're not trying to be innovative. The point is just keep it up to date.
Okay, sorry for that interruption.
Yeah, I mean, I think I go back to what Richard was saying. I mean, I think yesterday we had a panel with the different scientific advisory boards. And for me, what was really refreshing, actually, was to see South Africa and Canada.
Really, yeah?
Yeah, they had, because, for example, to give you an idea of the South Africa, it was mind-blowing. I mean, I'm not sure we will do it. Well, I'm sure we won't do it, actually. But it was interesting. They do everything online, full transparency. And the focus is just transition. And they had an impact, or they're having an impact. So that was very, very interesting. And then the other one, which for me was interesting, was the Canadian member from the Canadian Scientific Advisory Board. She's actually an activist, a scientist activist. And I think there's also, we have to find science in many places now. We know that came out from Working Group 2. Citizen science, it is going to be really fundamental. And I think I go back to what Antonio was saying. I think there is an issue, again, another thing that has been coming out again and again and again. We have to be better at communicating. Maybe, and then maybe we have to reflect or help our scientists reflect what kind of scientists are they. For example, I was at EGU last year, and one of the things that I really was super happy to see is that they had a session organized by Scientist Rebellion, and it was overflowing with scientists, because they really are now, because it's like we keep producing reports and they keep ignoring us, I mean, and there's this element of frustration and anger that is there in the generation. So the emotions are there now, Antonio. You're Italian, I'm Spanish. We're comfortable with those emotions. And again, I mean, I was lucky enough to go to Adaptation Futures, and one of the things that to me was most powerful, the session that was most powerful, was not run by scientists. It was actually run by the Yukon people in Alaska. And the reason why it was special is because they allowed us to feel as scientists. They said there's no contradiction between being rational and feeling. It's fine. We are sentient beings, and it's okay, and we are social beings. And I think, just to end, I go back to another thing that your minister said from Ireland. Social scientists, we do ethics, we do law, we do sociology. We are also scientists, right? And we need to also be part of the pack, And there's a lot of knowledge. We talk about paradigms. We talk about values. That's our language. We talk about anthropology. So let's bring all the sciences into the picture.
Law of science, I wonder. Yeah. Anyway, I joke. My legal colleague is sitting at the back of the room, so I have to acknowledge the greatness of the legal profession. My legal colleague, sorry. Yeah. Antonio, final words to you.
That's too much, but I don't share your optimism about university, Myles. I'm a university professor in Bologna.
Universities for some reason.
And I always, sometimes I say that society has problems and university have departments, and they don't fit. So I think I agree with Maria. The situation is still their career are not evaluated the right way. Certain kind of works are not part of the picture, and so this creates a negative set of incentives for doing the kind of ideas that we have in mind. It will change slowly. It will be very difficult to change this, quickly. And the whole implant of the academic system is designed in that way. So that's why I was saying, do we have the right institutions? Because I feel that certain kind of things simply cannot happen in a short time in the present setup that we have. Of course, they have their own role to fulfill. I mean, that's no question about that. But the kind of needs that are emerging, that they need to be satisfied, I don't not say now, but in the short term, and they simply don't fit with the geological rate of change of some of these institutions. So I feel that we really have to think about that. And going back about using existing institutions, I'm all for it. I'm happy. The question is that if you can fulfill that role. IPCC that's basically the last piece of institutional engineering that we have done in this field, okay? And it was designed that way because we needed a consensus, a place where everybody could come up and basically come up with a shared consensus. In fact, IPCC created, even if it's incredible to say, a shared factual basis. That's what happened in the end. The IPCC reports constitute the shared factual basis in which the conversation then takes place. So I feel that we should do a little bit more of those kind of things. And the idea of doing specialized discussion, like the one we want to do in Europe, for instance, is a good idea. It doesn't really overlap or interfere with the IPCC, is completing it in a way. So that's the kind of idea. We had to find, however, the right institutional arrangement so that we can attract the right people, we can reward the work properly. And Maria is right. The currencies in which scientists are rewarded is not only money. It's also intellectual recognition, satisfaction of the work they're doing, social relevance for the work they're doing. So these kind of currencies all come together, and if we work them, together, then we can even try to attract some of these people that are actually making money in California right now and working on AI.
Okay, thanks. On that positive note, Antonio, I think we'll bring this to an end, and unless somebody from the audience has a final statement to make. Oh, sorry, yeah.
So the GCP as a kind of process has been quite transformative in terms of its ability to bring annual updates to the table every year, and it's clearly a benchmark for other kind of improvements in terms of these annual indicators. But it's not the same as the kind of temperature number which goes into a COP text. That's a very high level number that requires recognition in the COP process, whereas the GCP is kind of an informative number that tracks alongside, and therefore it's been easier to spin up. So I wonder, do we have an understanding of how, like, is there a process to bring numbers into the COP process that are updated on an annual basis? Because my understanding is that essentially no, that kind of isn't in.
Well, just on the COP process, we have Earth Information Day, which is an annual event at which we can actually bring the latest information into the process here. How the parties react, I suppose, is up to the parties. So we can't sort of as Antonio I think said, facts aren't enough in a sense, and we do have to bring that multidimensional system there. But certainly there is ways and means, and obviously we'll have the next global stock take in 5 years' time. We're still waiting for this one to complete, and and it'll be an interesting. I suppose it's going to be very interesting for the IPCC how to respond to what's happened here in that very short timeline. In the meantime, we can work certainly on bringing together information and bringing it at a European level at least to a certain point where I think it'll be accepted as factual. And hopefully we'll do that and have that sorted by next March. And with that, I'd like to bring this event to a close. Again, thanks to our Norwegian hosts, thanks to all our speakers, and thank you, the audience, for being here. I know I promised you some of you champagne, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to have arrived. So maybe a COP29.